I will eat my hat here, Christian. I will owe you a steak dinner if I am wrong.
Write it down, folks. Don't forget.
Welcome to On Deadline, the Washington Examiner's political game show. I'm Tianelo Desher.
And I'm Christian Daytok.
Each week, we discuss the latest news and give our takes on it, and you get to vote with whom you agree. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. This week, we start above the fold, where each contestant has 1 minute to make the case for what they think is the most important story of the week. Christian, what's trending for you?
Elon Musk and DOGE are finally baring their fangs, announcing plans to shutter the United States Agency for International Development. Now, there's a lot of moving parts here, so let's walk through the facts. Last week, more than 100 USAID officials were placed on leave following Trump's 90-day freeze on foreign spending. The following weekend, 2 senior USAID officials were also put on leave after physically blocking DOGE officials from accessing classified personnel data. But here's the catch. USAID was started by executive order back in 1961. But in 1998, Congress formally made the agency independent with new legislation. That means it falls on them legally to be the ones dissolving the agency. This is just a preview of Donald Trump and Musk's push to cut federal spending by 30% by the end of the year, and I can't imagine it's going to be the last battle between the White House and Capitol Hill.
Christian, I think you get at the point that it is incredibly murky who is responsible for so much of this funding, because Congress really does continue to delegate away so much of its power, but we just continually fall into this fallacy that there is such a thing as an executive, as a truly independent agency or a truly independent body, when there isn't. From a constitutional perspective, there is not. There are executive agencies and departments, and those you serve at the pleasure of the president. And there are congressionally delegated agencies, and there you serve at the pleasure of Congress. So the idea that USAID should be beyond reproach, it is wrong, and I think the Trump administration's instinct here is correct. It's just, as we discussed last week, promoting breastfeeding in Tajikistan. None of this makes sense. That being said, how are they going about this? Nobody elected Elon Musk. He hasn't been Senate approved to any position. And he might have the legal right to be doing some of this. But he still has vested business interests in the Chinese Communist Party-controlled Beijing. Are we making sure that we are handling data properly, that people's information is secure? That, to me, is more concerning than do these overpaid bureaucrats still have a paycheck to go talk about diversity in Botswana?
You know, I think the reason that USAID is being targeted so early on is because of some of those more frivolous spending programs that you outlined. And I do think it's sort of going to be red meat for the red base that elected Donald Trump to office and who subsequently brought in Elon Musk with him. I think the real problem here has to do with the theory of impoundment, which I know you're familiar with. But for the folks back home, this is basically a constitutional line that the Trump administration is going to war with Congress over. Before the Nixon administration, presidents could go through this process where they basically said, even though this money has been appropriated by Capitol Hill, I'm going to block the disbursement to the agency or to whatever program it's earmarked for because it doesn't align with the policies I'm trying to pursue. The Trump administration and OMB soon-to-be director Russ Vought in particular have said that law that was passed in the 70s in and of itself is unconstitutional. So there's going to be a serious legal battle here. When it comes to addressing, waste that is actually wasteful and protecting Americans' interests, like you pointed to, I do think there needs to be some sort of overriding body, whether it's on the Hill or a different office in the executive branch, making sure that Elon Musk and DOGE aren't just going in willy-nilly and saying, we're going to cut programs and slash, potential competition to Mr. Musk's business practices, while again, still making sure the American voter, the American household is the primary focus. Because ultimately, Donald Trump's going to get himself in a lot of trouble if he lets Elon off the handle and start doing things that, are in his interest, but again, not in the interest of everyday Americans. All right, Tiana, what's the big story on your mind this week?
In the first commercial plane crash that resulted in fatalities in 16 years in this country, a military Black Hawk helicopter crashed into an American Airlines flight that was about to descend into the runway of DCA, that is here, Washington, D.C.'s local airport. President Trump was livid and blamed DEI initiatives for contributing to the crash. He is correct, but that does not mean that the individuals involved with the crash were incompetent. Consider this. Air traffic controllers. You have, in 2013, a precipitous drop in the amount of staff. Why? Because that's the year that Obama-era diversity initiatives went into effect, where they replaced a highly merit-based process with behavioral questions that gave people points for saying they played 4 or more sports in high school or failed science class. Why? Because they wanted to focus on diversity. So you had a lot of people that used to go in this pipeline to become an air traffic controller opt out if they realized they wouldn't have any job security. That contributed to these shortages. And Christian, we know there were shortages that night. There's supposed to be 30 people always in that DCA air traffic control tower. There on average is about 19. So you're talking about missing 33% benchmark.
I think one thing that's interesting, Tiana, is when you look at the idea of DEI, on its face, it does make sense that standards for hiring are dropped. But what I think is one of the more, disappointing developments with this story is the way that Donald Trump himself personally reacted. So it seemed like a big unforced error for him to blame this on DEI, at least so early, before, we had even recovered all of the bodies of those 60 people who perished in the Potomac River, not to mention the families out in Kansas who were waiting to hear if any of their loved ones, were able to be saved. So my question to you is this: does this incident make you feel better or worse about Donald Trump's temperament in this second term in office?
I mean, I'm not saying this just to appease the White House here, but it makes me feel better because first term Trump did not overturn this standard. And this employment practice, let's be clear, there's still a lot open about this crash. We know that there have been conflicting reports over whether or not there were enough air traffic controllers that night. There's been at least one report that there was one person doing the job of 2 people, and that's part of the reason why fewer than 5 minutes before the American Airlines was supposed to descend, they told them to use a different, more rarely used runway to descend, and that took it off the normal flight path to touch down on the tarmac. Donald Trump in the first term did not undo all these diversity initiatives. He just let sleeping dogs lie, right? And this time around, what was that? What were those remarks followed by? A promise. No, we're going back to the basics. We are getting rid of a behavioral questionnaire and people that took out years of their life and tens of thousands of dollars to go to the approved air traffic control training programs, then don't get in. And that's why you have about 2,500 grads from these programs that sued the Department of Transportation under Biden. And you have this issue where one of the big issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion tenets, like beyond just is it ethical to tell people that they should feel original sin over their skin color or over their gender? I don't think it is. But also, it's any time you introduce DEI as a metric, you're making metrics less objective. If a system is less obvious in terms of what the metrics of success are, if you are on a fixed income and you don't have guaranteed admission to air traffic control jobs, if you graduate from the program and pass the test, why would you invest all that time and money if, there's a 90% chance you'll fail this behavioral quiz because you're white? And that's what happened here.
It's certainly going to be a story that we're going to be continuing to talk about, as there have been actually 2 other deadly plane crashes following Wednesday night's tragedy. Now it's time for Yays and Nays, a segment where we both get to vote on the other big news in politics this week.
Trump's tariffs will blow up in his face.
Gonna take a leap of faith, Christian.
I'm going yes. And there have been a lot of developments here over the last couple of hours. In case you didn't know, Donald Trump decided to put 25% tariffs on both Canada and Mexico and 10% tariffs on China, all having to do with the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants into the country. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum came out Monday morning and said, I just spoke with Donald Trump, we've reached a deal, and we are going to be pausing those tariffs while negotiations proceed. And after just a couple of phone calls, Justin Trudeau did the same exact thing. But here's why I don't think this is going to be a substantive policy. The deal that Sheinbaum was referencing was to move 10,000 Mexican troops to the U.S. border to help police immigration and the drug trade. That being said, she made the same deal with Joe Biden back in 2021 to send 10,000 troops to the border to try and stop the flow of northern migration. On top of that, Guatemala and Honduras also ponied up an additional 8,500 troops and police and set up migration checkpoints in their respective countries. This just looks like Donald Trump, again, trying to throw red meat to his base without actually substantively changing the status quo on migration. I just don't think when the chips start falling down and, months down the road, tariffs might still be on place on Mexico. Immigration has not substantively changed. What's he going to do then? Decide putting, 100% tariffs on Mexico?
But let's put those 2021 stats into perspective, right? Yeah. Mexico and Guatemala and Honduras did all that after Biden ripped up Remain in Mexico, all the Safe Third Country agreements.
Revoked Title 42.
All of this was a giant green light, not just to migrants all across South and Central America, but also across the rest of the world. It's why we have this insane number of illegals from Iran and India
and China
and Mauritania and random, like the international, intercontinental level of human trafficking and illegal migrant smuggling. It was unfettered in a way that, no, 7,000 troops in Honduras was not going to stop it. Trump is getting Sheinbaum to do this on top of 8 million other things that people are seeing. There are many different signals just to kill the demand for illegal immigration, right? And this is just part of it. I will eat my hat here, Christian. I will owe you a steak dinner if I am wrong.
Write it down, folks. Don't forget.
This is maybe just raw wishful thinking, but I think there are too many real constraints on Trump for him to just be doing this in perpetuity, right? For one thing, Trump is a growth guy. As much as he does say, tariffs are the most beautiful word in the English language, he still responds to jobs created, the S&P, positive figures, positive metrics. He likes that. We know that. And we saw early on, before the Sheinbaum deal was announced, we saw crypto absolutely plummet, lost like billions of dollars in the markets. We saw the S&P down like 1.5%. The signs were not great.
Let's not forget, it's not just China and Mexico and Canada that are dealing with the potential for new tariffs now. The EU is firmly in the crosshairs. Donald Trump on Friday told us in the Oval Office, absolutely, he's putting new tariffs on our European allies. So can't wait for that story to break.
Now it's time for us to fill in the blank.
Of all of Trump's cabinet nominees, blank has the lowest odds of being confirmed.
This is difficult. There are really two names here that come to mind. I think they're probably the same, so I'll let you have the first bite of the apple.
Mine's RFK Jr.
Yep.
And this, again, could be wishful thinking on my end. But ultimately, RFK Jr. is not MAGA. Is not only inorganic and inauthentic to MAGA, he was very much just a concession that Trump had to make in order to get his endorsement, but also he gave the senators nothing to approve him. Remember, in order to make it to a final floor vote in the Senate, you have to be voted out of committee. And for RFK Jr., he can only lose one Republican vote if all the Democrats vote against. And it's possible he lost that vote in one crucial moment where Dr. Bill Cassidy, the Republican from Louisiana.
A doctor, let's not forget.
A gastroenterologist. So he works with patients with hepatitis B, right? He was basically begging Kennedy to say, can you just say now?
I'm a doc, trying to understand. Convince me that you will become the public health advocate, but not just churn old information so that there's never a conclusion, as Senator Hassan suggested, but that will become the influencer for people to believe, no, there's 1.25 million kids studied and there's no autism associated with measles.
I'm going to be an advocate for strong science. You show me those scientific studies.
But like the fact that RFK Jr. can't even like pretend to be not crazy, like like there's something where like Tulsi Gabbard has some more fringe views, but she knows how to comport herself.
She projects competence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas with RFK Jr., it's like, like, I'm trying to not say things that are like offensive and rude and dismissive, but it's difficult for me to take seriously anyone that has built their career on preying on the fears and pain of parents who have had kids with autism and are looking for a reason, looking for any explanation, looking for something because they just want an answer. And he has sold them a lie, and it's a comforting lie, but it's predatory.
Yeah.
It's predatory,
Yeah.
and if I were a senator, I would vote this hands down. If it ended Bill Cassidy's career, I think it'd be worth it. Like, I think it'd be worth voting against for your conscience, and that's what's core of the Hippocratic Oath as a physician: first do no harm.
The other name that I think we need to discuss in this segment, and you mentioned her, is Tulsi Gabbard. And I do think, and as an aside, it's interesting that the two nominees Trump put forward that are going to have the most trouble getting through the Senate are both former Democrats. That doesn't really have anything to with why they very potentially could not be confirmed. But Tulsi Gabbard's hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee did not go well. She knows her stuff, but she refused to answer simple questions like, do you believe Edward Snowden is a traitor? An issue that she's been very vocal on. Let's talk back about her 2019 Democratic primary campaign, where she called him a national hero. She said if she was the president, she would pardon him on day one. It looks a little weird having such, your convictions from the past be an issue that you say, I haven't really thought much about this anymore. The Senate Intelligence Committee, the Republicans on there, they are not quote unquote MAGA senators. They're very centrist. You got Susan Collins, James Lankford is probably the most staunch, well, Tom Cotton also the chairman.
Yeah.
Those two are the staunch conservatives. And I do think the mechanics of advancing these nominations, Gabbard can afford to lose one vote and have J.D. Vance eventually come in and be the tie-breaking vote. But if she loses more than 2 votes and John Thune decides to pull the levers and use Senate parliamentarian process to advance her out of committee, she's not going to pass a floor vote. I think there's one more point that I want to make about Gabbard. A related position, the FBI director nominee, Kash Patel, another contentious figure, another person that both Democrats and some Republicans had voiced concerns about. He did not get combative with people during his confirmation process. But there is a key difference. Tulsi Gabbard, while she was a politician, while she is a veteran, she has an upstanding record in those regards. Kash Patel is a career law enforcement official. I mean, that just goes to show the weakness of these two nominees. They are folks who might have been super duper popular with Trump's right-wing base on the campaign trail, but when it comes down to convincing these senators who will determine whether or not you get these jobs, they're refusing to play nice and refusing to even put forth a good faith measure to say, I might have said some crazy things in the past, but I've changed and I've studied the issues now. They're not doing that, and I think they're both at serious jeopardy of not being confirmed. We're ending this week with our last laugh segment, and we're putting the DNC chair elections under a microscope because you gotta just see this. Run the clip.
The rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender.
Tiana, this is essentially exactly what I didn't want the Democrats to do coming out of the November election. We know Donald Trump won because people were worried about their pocketbooks, they were worried about immigration, and they were tired of a party in power trying to subdivide us, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you look at, Faiz Shakir, who ran for DNC chair, was, urging people, we have to expand the tent,
Yeah.
But go back to the basics of what made us the most popular party in the country in the first place. And they basically threw him out the window. I mean, Ken Martin won, and our boy, David Hogg, who, we'll talk about David Hogg in a second, but he is the DNC vice chair, and I just don't think this is a winning strategy.
No, I mean, the fact that, having Jonathan Capehart moderate the debate and have every single person raise their hand saying, Kamala Harris lost because of racism and sexism. No, That answer there is why you lost and why Donald Trump keeps on getting away with stuff, all the foibles that we've had and all the things we've critiqued. The Republican Party will continue to be not only electorally dominant, but also culturally dominant if this is the best response the Democrats can muster. I always call it the Footloose test, Christian. If Footloose were made today, John Lithgow's character would not be like a conservative Christian school-marmy, whiny, nagging pastor. He would be a triple-masked, blue-haired Karen telling you misgendered me and I use your pronouns and there aren't enough non-binary, two-spirit people of color represented here. And that's just what, like, the Democrats, it's a branding issue, but clearly because that's what the party officials actually believe.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's everyone. Like, I always look at Pennsylvania as potentially, like, the bright spot. You saw Governor Josh Shapiro, a.k.a. he maybe would have helped Kamala Harris win, although the fundamentals were not great. Him just sticking it to PETA over the weekend when they say, we want to end Groundhog Day. And he just says, come and take it. No way. You're not taking Puxatawny Phil. Look, where is that attitude from Democrats? Why must they always be self-flagellating? And nothing says that Democrats really have their fingers on the pulse of America's beating heart than nominating David Hogg as vice chair of the DNC.
I'm gonna take it a little easy on Hogg because let's be honest, he was launched into politics through a tragedy, through the Parkland shooting, and this is an issue that I care about a lot. But he's talking about wanting to go on the offense and like really sticking it to Republicans. Maybe we should look in the mirror and realize that all of the strategies and tactics that he's pushing are basically why Kamala Harris lost in the first place. But in case you didn't listen to any of that, just make sure you know. Footloose 2 coming out next summer, maybe. Who knows? Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya. Should be a banger. I don't know.
Let us know who you think won this week's Clash, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you can catch next week's episode. I'm Tiana Lowe Desher.
And I'm Christian Daytalk.
And in the meantime, check out washingtonexaminer.com.